Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start the session. First, let me welcome to this session to the presentation of the IS number 37 issue about Palestine. I will pass in the word to Professor Marcial so we can introduce our speakers today. Thank you.
Obrigado. Está aberta a sessão. Eu vou falar primeiro em inglês, depois rapidamente em português. Some of the people who are more in touch with the CLP know that we never do public presentations of the journals. Because we do twice a year, and also because there is no social demand of that. But this case is an exception because we made an issue on Palestine for the first time, exclusively on Palestine. And we did that because this is a good opportunity to talk about much neglected issue in the media and in the academic life here in Portugal. And so we have the pleasure to have a mixed session. Some of our guests are here, some of them are online, especially our colleagues in Palestine. And we have with us the Palestinian ambassador, Mr. Nabil Al-Snaid, and I think he will say some introductory words, and then we'll talk a bit about this issue of the environment in Palestine. I'm going to pass him the word. Let me just tell this in Portuguese. Estava a dizer, que não suponho tudo, que nós não fazemos apresentações públicas da revista, mas isto é uma exceção pública, como sabem. Nós não trabalhamos especificamente sobre o Médio Oriente. É a primeira vez que fazemos uma revista só sobre a Palestina, embora os estudos africanos em geral também façam estes trabalhos sobre o Médio Oriente, e, sobretudo, porque é uma oportunidade para falar de um tema muito esquecido, tanto na Academia Portuguesa como nos mídias. Pronto, então fazemos esta sessão mista, tem colegas presenciais e online, e temos hoje aqui connosco o Sr. Embaixador da Palestina, a quem eu passo a palavra. Obrigado. Sr. Embaixador.
بدك تترجمي لهم. So there is no translation?
As you wish.
No, I mean up to them.
You can speak in English and I'll translate, or you can speak in Arabic and she will translate.
Do they have some students don't speak Portuguese?
Some.
Okay, then it's clear. Well, first of all, let me thank you all for coming, and special thanks for the Center of African Studies for inviting me. And this is my second visit to this campus. I'm happy to be here and to talk about a difficult subject, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which existed more than 100 years ago. But as you know, most of the conflicts in the world has ended, or they should end. But why this conflict is taking too long, and we don't see any hope for peace? And if you think I can bring a good news today for a solution, I think you will be disappointed. For many years, I'm in politics and teaching at universities. My kids now working toward peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So it's moving the conflict from one generation to the other. And for this reason, it's important to understand what is the conflict, why this conflict is difficult to solve. Then I go back a little bit to the history. for the creation of the state of Israel in Palestine. I think there were some movements within Europe before even Zionists and Zionism met in their first conference. Some people in Europe, for different reasons, they were trying to make Judaism a nationality, not a religion for Jews, to make it a nationality that means they should have a country on their own. So Europe, mainly England, supported the creation of Israel before even Zionism was discussing that. So why? Because they had interest, which to get rid of as many Jews as they can from Europe. Second, to make sure that Israel would be part of the West in the Middle East, to serve the interest of European imperialism against the will of the people in the Middle East, or quote the Islamic people, or the Muhammadis, they call it, in the Middle East. So this is the ideas existed, and officially England adopted that in Balfour Declaration, which they promised the Jews of a homeland in Palestine in 1917. So you can see the creation of Israel. It came within European imperialism and colonization in the Middle East. So, and for this reason, there was interest between European imperialism and the existence of Israel on both sides to keep Israel as a strong ally. So that's one reason in the Middle East, Israel is considered not a Middle Eastern country, a colonial power, and was supported by European imperialism. United States were not partner with Balfour Declaration, but they supported it. Most of American presidents since that time, till the mid-40s, they were pro the creation of Israel and supporting Zionism. From 1945, the issue of creating the state of Israel became a domestic issue in the American politics till today. So when you talk about Israel in the United States, you are talking a domestic issue, not a foreign policy, because it's affected most of the people, or the Jewish lobby, which is very, very strong, and the Christian Zionists who really share Zionism, their view. So from that time till today, the issue of Israel is part of the American interest and European imperialism. Then how you could create Israel as a state against the will of the Palestinians who live there since history. So Israel has to be militarily strong, and they have to colonize and to take land. So this is the theme, because Israel and Zionism, if you read Zionism, they say Zionism could not survive without colonizations and settlements. So it's a pillar, the main one of colonization of land. So that's how Israel to survive. And second, military. And till today, Israel never declared their borders. Every state in the world which gets recognition declare its borders. You see Israel till today, where are their borders? It's not clear, and they don't want to declare it. So you can see how Europe, United States support in Israel. Israel depends on expansion and colonization and also terror to drive the Palestinians out, because the Palestinians did not volunteer to leave their homes. And there were so many massacres until today. This is how the conflict is. So in 1967, when Israel occupied the rest of Palestine, the West Bank, they thought, well, great, Palestine is wiped out of the map, and now we can have it. So they were thinking of the land, not the people. So then Israel faced a problem, what we should do with the Palestinian people. They believe the land is there. Some of them believed God gave it to them. Palestinians should not exist. So this is now started the second stage of the conflict, the Israeli occupation to the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, who really believe they want to go back to their origin, Palestine. Then they thought, no, maybe we should consider to have a state where we are in 1967 borders. And Israel thought maybe both are not acceptable. We really should find some ways. So now what you're hearing about some issues, the Palestinians in the occupied territories, their situation, what you should do with them. Now you hear about two-state solution. You hear, which means Palestinians could have state in part of their country, just 22%. The West Bank and Gaza, 22% of historical Palestine, and Israel have 78. So the Palestinians say, well, we cannot change history. We can have a better future, at least with the 22%. So the Israelis always say no to a Palestinian state. We will not talk to the Palestinians. Yesterday, Lapid, the new foreign minister in New York, for the first time, would say maybe Israel will accept the idea of a Palestinian state. The right wing in Israel today, they are attacking him everywhere and saying he is giving up the land of Israel. He is giving Arafat people in a way, Israel and so on. But the whole world in New York saying, all the countries, even the foreign minister of Portugal said, we support the Palestinian state. We don't recognize the settlements and the land confiscation on all this. Guterres, he is also Portuguese, the Secretary General of the UN, talking about a peaceful settlement, and the only settlement will have the two-state solution. So Israel is saying no to the two-state solution, no to the one state. And what do they want? They think maybe the Palestinians could govern themselves, but govern, that means their daily affairs. But the legislations, and so it will come from the Israeli military, which controls Palestine. And it seems like this is continuing the occupation, but they want to change a different look in it. And they say civil administration, not military occupation. They changed it to civil administration. So this is the idea there. And Israel is enjoying the benefit all these years. Because if you want Israel to change their behavior, you want to force them and to force them militarily. But if not, you have international law to apply it and say, this cannot work, occupation, and continue oppressing another people who live in their lands. Or to make Israel to make the occupation costly by resistance and so, or maybe a reason that many Israelis will come, they're conscious to say, this should not continue. We cannot do this because we suffered as Jews through history. Why we should occupy other people and make them suffer? I will tell you just myself, I grew up under occupation. Till today, I have no freedom of movement. I cannot travel freely. I cannot say what I want freely. I have no rights. But why? What did I do to the Israelis? So it's occupation, and you know how occupation is terrible. So things are very difficult to the Palestinians. No one can force Israel militarily. International community failing miserably because there is no international law Israel did not violate it. Who cares? Israel does not listen. How many UN resolutions, Security Council, international community, this. Conscious, I think many Israelis saying it, but to say no to the occupation, some young Israelis, they refuse to go to the army, and that's still not affecting the Israelis because the Israelis going to more toward the right. International community, it's interesting. Take the position of Europe. Europe is criticizing the Israeli policy on the Middle East, no to the settlements, no to the occupation, yes to the Palestinian rights, and they give support to the Palestinian institutions, education, hospitals, and so on, which means indirectly supporting the occupation, because in international law, the occupying forces' responsibility is to take care of education and health of the occupied people. So when Europe pays the Palestinians, the Israelis say, well, thank you, Europe, quietly, you are doing what we have to pay. Then Europe criticize Israel and say, well, what you are doing is wrong. They don't care. Well, Palestinians try to go to international organizations, ICC, UNESCO, World Health. So Israel will boycott, and America, all these, now they are not in the UNESCO because they accepted the Palestinians are members. What's wrong in accepting Palestinians to be members in culture of the world? It was excluded and they are not allowed, and they threatened to leave. With, for example, World Health Organization, the Americans cut the fund if they take Palestinians as a member. So African kids, when they need medicine, they say, well, no money. Why? Because of the Palestinians. Because they took Palestinians are members in these international organizations. So where the Palestinians would go? This is a question, what solution we will have. Nothing is working at the moment. Israel, we can't make it the Palestinians, the occupation costly, because all our friends in the international community saying, well, we support you Palestinians, but we will not support your struggle militarily to force Israel out. Okay, what would you support? To join, if you join us, join international organization, also we are facing the problem. So Israel is enjoying the benefit today that we are used as a cheap labor in Israeli construction sites. Israeli used us as their market. Israelis are beneficiaries of the occupation. So this is the situation today. Either the international community will be really serious with Israel to take decisions and really boycott Israel unless they recognize the Palestinians or leave the occupation, and to be a movement like South Africa. I can see the occupation will have a short life. I believe also the solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it has to be a peaceful one. I don't think military or killing is the choice, because we had a long experience in suffering both sides from bloodshed. It should end. So we are facing all these issues today. Without your support, I think the occupation will continue. With criticizing Israel, I think the Israelis would not care, will tell you, oh, let the Palestinian cry, European protest as much you want, and we, the Israelis, build settlement and behave as we want. So this is in general, this conflict, and that's how it is difficult unless some stand with the Palestinian, unless the Palestinian issue is not left for the Palestinian alone, because they are oppressed, and oppression, it should be all humankind business. As Desmond Tutu said, if you see oppressed and oppressor and you don't do anything, you are siding with the oppressor. So silence from the international community is not acceptable in this moment when you see other people suffering for no reason. Thank you. This is my introduction. I'd be happy if there are any questions on this issue.
Thank you. Okay, so let me explain you how this will work. This is a round table, not the full form seminar. So we are asking our colleagues to make short interventions, and then we will start a series of debates. Okay, I will start now the program, which after Mr. Ambassador, it was my turn to tell you something about very shortly about this journal. We decided to make for the first time in the history of editions of African Studio an issue exclusively on Palestine, and not on a comparative way, because we have already published a lot of things about the Arab and North African and Middle East, but in a comparative framework. And we did that for two or three reasons we are going to, I'm going to explain. The first is that Palestine, as in itself, it's also part of comparative and very useful material for colonial studies. As Mr. Ambassador stressed, and I'm sure most of you will know, Palestine is a current conflict with a very clear colonial pattern. And the colonial studies are a editorial tradition of African Studio. We have published many things on colonial studies, and Palestine is currently one of the most striking colonial conflicts of the moment. This said, a lot of things have been published on Palestine and the colonial conflict in Palestine. Many things about human rights, about political movements, about political parties, and so on. But there are very few things, especially and specifically, about the impact of the environment, of the conflict on the environment. Usually, even the people who doesn't have a very strong idea about Palestine, if they go to Palestine, like the Chinese say, an image is better than 1,000 words. If you go there, you will understand very quickly what is going on. And if you go there, especially also in the environmental issues, you'll understand very clearly that very wrong things are happening. But most of these environmental aspects of the conflicts are not so well known outside Palestine. So we decided to focus in this journal, especially on this environmental issues. So this said, and I expect to, I made a very short subset of what we say in the introduction of the journal, and I pass the word, if possible, to one of our colleagues in Palestine, who was one of the main coordinators of this issue, and is Professor Hamad Abu Ahmad of Birzeit University. I don't know if he can reach us.
He is,
Are you with us?
I think he is.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead, Ahmad.
Okay, I am sorry, Marcel. I will be very quick because I have another, commitment. I would like, first of all, to thank also Ms. Carla for all the efforts you put into this work. And I hope that this would be, the first step for our, cooperation, and there will be future also fruitful and mutual cooperation between Palestinians and between Portuguese professors and researchers. I will link, and I will be, very quick because I have to leave. I am sorry because I thought it would be 4 o'clock, p.m. Palestine. And it seems that we have two hours differences. Anyhow, I will share my presentation, which will be, very quick. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I will just, present some important environmental issues and problems in Palestine, both due to the Israeli occupations as well as due to the Palestinian themselves. I will, first of all, I will talk about the current state of the environment, including water, land, and soil, natural resources, urbanization and waste management, and then I will go to the driving factors for such environmental challenges. I don't know if somebody doesn't know where is Palestine, but it is at the eastern part of the Mediterranean, as you see here. This is Palestine, and this is the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So it is on the at the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, located to the south of Lebanon. Here is Lebanon, here, and to the south of Turkey also. And here is Jordan to the west of Jordan. This is like a very quick, introductory for the location of Palestine. Now, the status of environment, we have problems concerning fresh water are being, polluted by waste from either Israeli settlements inside the West Bank, as well as from Palestinian towns and villages. And this, of course, caused by untreated wastewater infiltration into the groundwater and into the surface water, wadis, rivers, and so on. The second is the solid waste disposal capacities and facilities are inadequate into the West Bank and Gaza. It is estimated that we produce about 800 tons of solid waste per day, and this is the amount that we can account for. But there is another, amount of solid waste that is thrown from the Israeli settlements inside the West Bank that we cannot account for. We cannot approximate that amount. See, this is the solid waste, and this is the wastewater, which is, flowing in different areas, polluting the vegetation, polluting the soil, polluting the surface water and the groundwater in the West Bank and in Gaza. The third is the soil pollution from discharging of raw and untreated wastewater into waters and into the agricultural land. As you see here, where we have the pollution of soil from either the solid waste or from either the wastewater coming out of Palestinian and Israelis, urbanized areas. The fourth is the remains from stone industry. We have a very big and influential stone industry, stone quarries, stone cutting facilities, and so on. And this remains is in the form of either dust, like you see, which affect vegetation, surrounding vegetation and wildlife, and also in the form of slurry after cutting these stones and reshaping it. It will make a liquid called the slurry, which affect both the vegetation, the soil, and also it could infiltrate into the groundwater and surface water and pollute it. Also, and this is mainly, a Palestinian related problem, which is excessive use of pesticides and chemicals, fertilizers in agriculture. It is estimated that, that we use about 600 tons of chemicals into the West Bank, which is a very huge amount and affect the health, affect the biodiversity, and affect water resources. We have also soil, water, and air pollution by unregulated electronic waste and the used vehicle also. It is estimated that into the West Bank, we have 500,000 cars and vehicles. From these, we have about 200,000 illegal cars and vehicles coming from inside Israel. They are unlicensed and they are polluting and making, noise and making accidents and so on. Also, the amount of electronic waste coming from Israel and processed into Palestinian villages and towns is estimated to be about 57,000 tons per year, which is a very huge amount, and it could be making, a dangerous pollution for people, the Palestinian people. We have inside the West Bank, which should be Palestinian by itself, we have 11 Israeli industrial complexes which are located into the West Bank and which are producing solid waste, wastewater, also dangerous, either solid or liquid waste, making, difficulties and making, threats to the health of the environment, to the health of soil, to the water, and also to the health of human beings, Palestinian human beings. And finally, the land use changes, because we have a very quick development, especially into the urbanization process due to the high population growth rate, which is about 2.7 to 3% annually. So we have to build, and change the land use from agriculture and from greenery to urbanized high-rising buildings. This is applicable to Palestinian as well as to the Israeli colony, where you see here where I am, pointing out Israeli colonies and with the apartheid wall and occupation and protection towers and so on. Like here, here is Nablus, which is a very condensed urban area, and this is Kufur Aqab. It is nearby, Jerusalem, a very condensed also area. Also, and finally, the weakness of environmental governance arrangements into Palestinian side have led to data and enforcement gaps, since not every aspect we have laws and bylaws, we have regulations, we have follow-up of the different aspects and different driving factors of the pollution. So we have to put more efforts in this factor. Now, the drivers of environmental change, we have socio-economic drivers that we talked about, overpopulation and urbanization and so on. We have environmental governance driver, which we talked about, which is represented by Palestinian movement and access to land. It is forbidden by the Israeli in Area C, for example, and even in sometimes in Area B. We have Palestinian policymakers and professionals cannot employ best practices because of the lack of knowledge, the lack of expertise, the lack of equipment, and also the lack of movement because they are denied to move from area to area. Also, we have lack of political progress between the Israeli and between the Palestinian, which led to unclear and overlapping environmental governance arrangements. Yani sometimes in some area, the Israeli declared that this is upon their protection and it is upon their laws, in which the Palestinian cannot apply their laws even. So there is overlapping. Also, the Israeli settlements and security measures cause environmental changes and degradation, soil degradation and biodiversity degradation and exploitation of resources, the natural resources. This is only for comparison between the annual consumption of water into the occupied Palestinian territories, which is estimated to be 76 liters per day, with an Israeli person, which is about 330, almost 5 times that of the Palestinian. And the lack of water enough and the fresh water can make also a very serious environmental problem. It is estimated that in 2040 we have to have 700 million cubic meter to satisfy our basic needs. But until now we have only into both Gaza and the West Bank only about 300. So we left with a deficit of about 400 million cubic meter, or at least 300 cubic meter, which could create obstacles toward development, obstacles toward health of the Palestinian, toward agriculture and so on. By this, I hope that I gave a very quick overlook on the environmental, challenges and environmental pollution into the Palestine. Thank you for listening, and I hope that we will see you in person in the future. Thank you very much.
Ahmad, we will not be here with us for the debate again.
And for unfortunately, I have to leave. Thank you very much, Maciel, and hope to see you soon in maybe in Palestine or maybe in somewhere else. And hello, Mazen, how are you? Fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay, leave it to you. And
Okay.
thanks. Bye-bye.
Azim, go ahead.
How much time do you want me to speak for? I don't know if you're running
About
behind.
be great. 10
Sorry?
minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Great, thank you. Let me share my slides with you. Okay. I hope you can see what I'm showing. So very briefly, Palestine, of course, is a very important country. It's an intersection of continents. It's where humans migrated out of Africa to the rest of the world. And it's also the Fertile Crescent where humans first developed agriculture, domesticated plants and animals, things like wheat and barley, etc. And that's due to its geography and very rich biodiversity. And of course, when we invented the agriculture, we also invented other things because we had time on our hands. So that includes, various forms of structures and buildings and the alphabet, including the alphabet that you use. So that is basically what we call civilization. Now, the threats that we face environmentally, of course, are similar to the rest of the world. There are 5 major threats: climate change, pollution, habitat destruction, overexploitation, and invasive species. We can add settler colonialism in our case. And settler colonialism, of course, I don't want to talk too much about it, but it has destroyed 500 Palestinian villages and towns and resulted in shrinking of the land of Palestine, similar to what happened in the United States when the European colonizers came. In fact, this map of shrinking Palestine came as was drawn first by my son when he saw the shrinking map of the United States. The colonization affects the environment, and for example, when they destroyed those 530 Palestinian towns and villages, many of the villages, they destroyed the landscape around them, they uprooted the trees and changed it from a polyculture of various types of trees to a monoculture of only pine trees, and these are susceptible to fires. And of course, there was a diversion of the waters of the Jordan River, which dried up the Jordan River basin from 1,350 million cubic meters per year annual discharge into the Jordan River. It was reduced to 20. So there was a draining of the wetlands of the Hula area, which also resulted in destruction of habitats, and 219 species disappeared. The water and gas and other natural resource issue were talked about, so I won't cover that. But this is Jabal Abu Ghnaim here right next to me. This is what it looked like in the top. And what it looks like at the bottom, there has been a decline in vertebrate biodiversity in Bethlehem. There's also the industrial settlements that Israel is built on Palestinian land that destroy its habitat. We discussed some of these in the papers that are found in the journal. You can read about them. For example, the paper by Hussein and about the wall and its impact on biodiversity. And you can read about that. The destruction, of course, is ongoing and continues to the habitats. And I hope just to give you a couple of minutes about potential solutions. In the paper by Baradaiya, Isa Musa and I discuss how power dynamics plays out in terms of environmental justice and how you can address this imbalance of power when the field is tipped, basically. It's very hard to protect the environment. In fact, our environment is in a catastrophic situation, requires much more drastic measures than cosmetics. It requires more than simply putting out some symptoms and explaining about those symptoms, or even making diagnosis. What we have is settler colonialism, plus the 5 other threats to our environment. It takes actually doing something about it and offering solutions. And I don't have too much time to go through this, as I said, but basically we in the state of Palestine are trying to do as best as we can now. In the last 5 years, I would say, or 7 years, there has been some significant movement that's positive. Earlier, there wasn't. I'll give you an example. When Israel designated protected areas and handed over to the Palestinians in the 1990s, the list and maps of these protected areas, the Palestinian Authority didn't have the capacity or the people or perhaps the will to investigate. Now we have the will and the capacity to investigate. So just in the past year or a year and a half, we looked back at those protected areas and we decided that most of them are designated for political purposes to protect Israel, basically, and protect the Zionist project, for military training, to allow the settlers to expand and so on. Not really because they need protection from an environmental standpoint. So we did a new protected area network. You will be hearing more about that in the next month or two when it gets adopted by the Prime Minister's office, ministerial offices. Same thing with the issues of obligations of Palestine under the treaties that Palestine is signing or has signed. Some treaties were signed much earlier, but were not implemented. And now we implement them and we work on them. These pictures are just some of the activities of our own center related to environmental issues. I'll skip through them. But we do believe that the environmental justice issues here are interwoven with the political issues. And so hence we also encourage boycott, divestment, and sanctions, just like happened with South Africa under apartheid, to address environmental injustice and imbalances. We engaged in boycott, divestment, sanctions. So we encourage people to engage in this. And here is our website, palestinenature.org. And my email, info@palestinenature.org, if you would like to contact us. Read the papers that are in the journal carefully, because they lay out the issues. But again, I think we need much more on the side of therapy, if you want, and prognosis. And the papers are very good, strong in the earlier parts of the issues, like the symptoms and the diagnosis and the patient history. But I think, a few papers start to talk about the future, and I think we need to talk about the future more and what we can do and how we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mazin, especially because you were very, very strict time. This is an informal meeting, but anyway, I cannot exaggerate. So I forgot to make the formal presentation of our speakers. Ahmad is Professor Ahmad Abu Ahmad, and is a professor of geography at the Birzeit University, shortly. And the last speaker we had is Professor Mazin Koumzieh. He is a professor of Bethlehem University and also director of the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. Okay, and now I will ask another colleague. These three colleagues, Professor Ahmad, Mazin, and one will address you now, were the main drivers of this journal. The African Studies Center just made the coordination and the editorial work, so they were the, let's say, the scientific responsible for this fund. And now we shall have Professor Mustafa El Enani of the University of Angers, France, who has been working with Palestinian environment for a long time. And I think he will speak in French, and I will try to make the translation. Okay, thank you. Go ahead. To many languages.
Will you dire pour is here? Okay. Thank you very much, cher George.
Mustafa, tu vas parler doucement?
Oh, je parle toujours doucement.
Phrase courte.
Bon, tous les titres sont traduits en anglais.
Okay, good.
Voilà.
Okay.
Ça va faciliter la tâche. Bien, ben, merci. Dans tous les cas, je tiens à dire merci à l'Institut des études africaines d'avoir fait cette proposition d'un numéro spécial sur la question environnementale d'une manière générale. Je sais que la Palestine ne fait pas de leur territoire, mais c'est pas loin de l'Afrique non plus. Donc, merci encore une fois à Marcia, à Carla d'avoir accompagné. Voilà. Moi, je change complètement de logique et j'aimerais bien parler de ce qu'on peut appeler l'expérience coloniale.
Okay. Mustafa is now talking about the colonial experience. Yeah.
Je suis originaire d'un pays du Maghreb, donc il a subi la colonisation. Je n'ai pas vécu la colonisation française, mais il ne faut jamais oublier que dans les ex-colonies africaines, surtout l'Afrique, on ne parle toujours pas de l'expérience coloniale. Il n'existe pas d'expérience coloniale, de point de vue historique.
I think it comes from a country which was under French colonization, and he says that it's interesting that they don't speak about this colonial experience in the former colonized countries.
La raison est simple, c'est qu'on n'a pas encore écrit l'histoire du colonialisme en Afrique.
And the reason, according to him, is that colonial history has not yet been written in the colonial countries, dans les pays coloniaux.
Dans les pays coloniaux, oui. Bien, alors je vais aller très vite. Une réflexion. Hein. Donc, mon approche à moi, j'ai visité la Palestine 4 fois. Donc, une fois que je suis arrivé en Palestine, ma première question, c'est quoi un paysage colonial? Qu'est-ce que ça signifie un paysage colonial? Et c'est vrai que c'était un choc, il faut être honnête, c'était un choc de découvrir ce que c'est qu'un paysage colonial. Tu veux dire?
He has been 4 times in Palestine, and one of the questions he wants to address is, because it was suggested to him by the Palestinian landscape, is what is a colonial landscape?
Donc, c'est pourquoi si...
I'm doing very free translations.
Ouais. Donc, ma question, alors, j'ai dit, je vais essayer de comprendre ce que c'est qu'un paysage colonial à travers la Palestine. Et je veux tenter quelque chose qui est relativement osé d'un point de vue historique, mais tout à fait permis d'un point de vue analyse des paysages. C'est la comparaison entre le colonialisme, un phénomène colonial au Moyen-Orient, le phénomène colonial en Afrique. C'est des contextes différents, certes, mais le processus, les modalités et les logiques sont les mêmes.
His main goal was to understand what is colonial landscape through Palestinian landscape. And he also says that colonial landscape, of course, changes with the context, with the different contexts. But there are some common points, okay?
Et j'ai essayé de comprendre. Alors, le principe de base dans un processus de colonialisme, c'est la modification de paysage. C'est vraiment l'élément clé. Vous ne pouvez pas coloniser et illustrer la colonisation, qu'il soit visible. Il faut que l'acte colonial soit visible. Et pour que l'acte colonial soit visible, il faut qu'elle transforme le paysage.
Yeah, the landscape changement is essential to colonialism. Colonialism must be seen through a change in the colonial landscape. You always lose a lot of things in translation.
Sorry.
Perdeu a ligação?
Não, não perdeu. Eles não estão a ver a apresentação PowerPoint do outro lado.
Ah,
I'm sorry.
OK? OK? Yes. Donc, là, c'est pourquoi dans tous les processus dans tous les processus coloniaux, la première chose qu'on a cherché à faire, il ne veut pas là. Ouais, OK. Donc, la première chose qu'on a cherché à faire, quand on a, là, vous avez deux images, donc j'ai commencé à comparer. Les premières images là, à gauche, ce sont des peintures de paysages faites par l'armée française en Algérie. Il ne faut pas oublier que l'armée française, elle était toujours accompagnée par des peintres, artistes.
okay, on the left, these are examples about colonial representation of landscape. And the left images are images painted by painters of the Algerian of the French army in Algeria. Okay.
Et si vous regardez bien, au premier plan de la photo, vous avez des vestiges, ce qu'on appelle des ruines romaines.
Roman ruins on the left.
Et vous savez ce qu'ils ont dit les Français en arrivant? Ils ont dit, on est de retour.
The French said we are back.
Donc, autrement dit, ça veut dire que l'armée française, elle retrouve un paysage qui a été fabriqué par les Romains et ce sont tout à fait normal de s'inscrire dans cette continuité romaine. C'est intéressant quand même. Il y a une continuité historique, donc il y a une continuité culturelle et pourquoi pas une continuité spatiale.
So colonization seen as a continuity, historical continuity.
De l'autre côté, vous avez la carte de la Palestine avec la même logique.
On the right side, you have a colonial representation of Palestine.
Alors, je n'ai pas traduit tout ce qui est écrit en hébreu, mais come to see d'Israël. Pourquoi venir voir Israël? Parce qu'il y a des raisons pour y aller. Je crois que l'acte colonial, il doit trouver des raisons d'eux. Donc, pour la Palestine, c'est encore pire, parce qu'il y a un héritage historique tellement complexe que chacun peut trouver ses raisons d'être en Palestine. Il ne faut jamais oublier ça.
Although Palestine is a layer of many cultures, here you have a picture that says "Come to see Israel," which is the top layer of all these historical things.
Ok, bon. Donc, voilà, alors un exemple. Donc, une fois que vous avez remarqué dans le titre, j'ai parlé du paysage urbain, mais vous ne pouvez pas dissocier dans la colonisation l'urbain et le rural. Même si on commence par le rural, en fait, ils sont. Et là, je vous donne un exemple de l'urbain. Alors, tout processus de colonisation doit créer ce qu'on appelle des paysages duels, c'est-à-dire deux paysages complètement différents. Il y a le paysage qui appartient aux indigènes, c'est-à-dire les locaux, et le paysage fabriqué par celui qui domine. Et là, vous avez la ville de Marrakech avec la cité ancienne, la Médina, et la nouvelle cité coloniale avec un no man's land entre les deux.
The colonial landscape is very connected with cities, as you know. But one feature of colonial landscape is its dual dimension. You have always the new one, the colonial one, and the native one. And in this case, you can see, for instance, what happened in an old town like Marrakech, in which you have the new city and the native city, the old city, separated by a sort of a no man's land.
Et maintenant, on a un problème dans les pays, les ex-colonies, c'est que les traces de la colonisation, on doit les considérer comment? Est-ce que c'est un héritage? Est-ce que c'est un patrimoine? Ou est-ce que ce sont des traces à effacer?
So, and this leads to a difficult issue in the new independent countries who were former colonies. What is this? How should we consider this colonial heritage? Something that is worthwhile to keep, or must we let it down, okay, and erase it?
C'est peut-être le début de l'histoire. Qui sait, on verra. Donc, je veux aller plus loin. Donc, là, alors, il y a une très belle phrase qui n'est pas un géographe, mais plutôt un littéraire, qui dit l'image qui est là-haut, c'est la ville de Marrakech dans son contexte paysager qui est une palmeraie. Et l'image en bas, c'est ce qui se passe actuellement sur l'urbain maintenant. Donc, c'est une métamorphose complète de la ville. Et en fait, la ville est morte. Vive l'urbain. Mais je ne sais pas comment tu vas la traduire comme ça. C'est un truc.
La ville morte.
La ville est morte. Vive l'urbain.
Ah oui. Okay, so you have an example through Marrakesh again. In the first picture, you have an old picture of Marrakesh within its surrounding palm trees, and then you have a picture of today's Marrakesh. The city is dead, but the urban area is there. Okay.
Il y a un autre géographe qui a qualifié que c'est une catastrophe urbaine.
Okay. For some, this is an urban catastrophe.
Et le début, c'était avec la ville coloniale. Le premier acte de la destruction de la cité, c'est la ville coloniale.
Well, the first moment of colonial city, the structure of the city is the colonial.
Non, ça, je saute parce qu'on n'aura pas le temps.
Yeah.
Voilà. Donc, la Palestine. Alors, la Palestine, c'était un problème pour moi, je l'ai déjà dit. Donc, il fallait que j'appréhende, je comprends l'organisation de paysages en Palestine. Ce n'était pas une mince affaire, j'avoue. D'un point de vue conceptuel, ce n'était pas évident. Et c'est toujours pas évident. Parce qu'il y a du tout. Voilà. Je mets qui en défi qui serait capable d'expliquer ce qui se passe en Palestine.
Well, to understand the Palestinian landscape is not easy, very briefly. Okay, go ahead. I think we should.
Alors, toujours la même logique dans le discours colonial. La Palestine, c'était un territoire vierge. C'est quand même rigolo.
In the colonial speech, Palestine is depicted as an empty, a virgin territory.
Pour la Palestine, hein, quand même. C'est la même logique qu'on a utilisée au Maghreb, en Afrique et en Amérique. C'était des territoires vierges.
All the colonial officers have always depicted colonial territories as empty and virgin.
Qui dit territoire vierge, donc c'est un territoire à valoriser, à occuper. Alors, c'est fini.
Which valorizes the occupier and the work of the occupier.
Donc voilà, grosso modo, je schématise comment le système colonial travaille les deux grands types de paysages, à savoir le rural et la ville, mais on sait qu'ils sont liés. Alors, trois variables, c'est les trois variables. Il faut revoir les espèces, c'est-à-dire les types de végétation à planter dans le rural. Il faut revoir les formes d'organisation d'un paysage et il faut revoir les fonctions d'un paysage. C'est vraiment les trois fondamentaux dans un processus de domination.
So, key to read the landscape in this movement are these three variables. For instance, if you take a rural landscape, what kind of species you find there? What is the form of the landscape? And what is the landscape for? Okay.
Et fonctions.
The function.
This is the landscape in Palestine.
Okay.
Il y a, sincèrement, il y a plus de paysages en Palestine. C'est fini, le paysage en Palestine.
There is no more Palestinian landscape, as you can see.
C'est vraiment la négation de ce qu'on peut appeler le paysage, ou cette phrase que j'ai toujours trouvée belle de Mahmoud Darwish, c'est la nature, c'est l'équivalent de pays. La nature en Palestine est simple, mais elle est belle. Voilà, c'est la première phrase là-bas. J'ai trouvé ça, mais cette nature simple et belle en Palestine, c'est maintenant remise en cause.
The sentence you have seen in the upper part is from a very well-known Palestinian poet, Mahmoud Darwish, who wrote this sentence. Okay, but you can make the contrast with the images.
Et tout ce que vous voyez comme bâti, j'ai trouvé quelque chose qui m'a beaucoup intéressé. J'ai découvert qu'il n'y a pas de planification. On parle de planification urbaine, mais il n'y en a pas. Ça veut dire qu'en Palestine, on construit l'urbain. On ne construit plus de villes palestiniennes. On construit l'urbain, mais on ne construit plus de villes palestiniennes. Vous ne trouverez plus l'équivalent de Beit Lahm ou de Beir Zaïd. Non, ça c'est fini. Ça construit de partout. Et c'est un gros problème. Hein. C'est pas...
So there is absolutely no urban planning in Palestine. And in Palestine, you will find urban areas, but no longer the Palestinian city. This is over. There is no more Palestinian city.
C'est vraiment un paysage éclaté. Ça, c'est des aménagements, pas des Israéliens, c'est les Palestiniens qui construisent. Hein. C'est pas les Israéliens. Les Israéliens, ils ont rajouté les colons. Et on va voir que c'est très complexe. Donc voilà, je ne veux pas rester longtemps parce qu'en fait, ce qui m'a intéressé, voici tout l'imaginaire. Parce que ça, c'est le deuxième volet de la colonisation, c'est l'imaginaire.
Okay, but let's
Voilà.
This is a very complex issue because some of these issues are not the direct consequence of the Israeli policy. It was not the Israelis who built that, although the Israeli policy is there to make these changes. And you will now pass to the representation.
C'est vraiment important. C'est ce qu'on appelle les formes de domination invisibles, mais sont actives.
Of these invisible ways to colonize.
Et regardez les types de paysages dans les affiches. D'accord? Il y a des affiches, ce sont des Israéliens. Il y a des affiches, ce sont des Palestiniens. Et on n'a pas la même lecture du paysage. Je ne veux pas rester longtemps là-dessus. Donc,
Okay.
voilà, je résume. Hein. Non, je veux aller vraiment là. Ça m'intéresse parce qu'il y a beaucoup de choses à dire. Donc, je synthétise dans ce schéma l'organisation de territoires palestiniens, d'accord, et comment le processus de domination, il est toujours actif. C'est ça qui est intéressant. La colonisation en Palestine ne s'est jamais arrêtée.
The colonial process in Palestine is a continuous. It has never ended.
Mais ce qui est intéressant, c'est de voir que le processus de domination-colonisation, il est hybride.
It is a mixed one.
Ça veut dire que vous avez un territoire, j'ai un territoire, j'ai Israël, vous avez les territoires palestiniens, mais ces territoires, ils doivent rester, il y a comme ce qu'on appelle, je ne sais pas comment tu vas l'interpréter, une interpénétration entre les deux.
Formally, there are two territories side by side, but the colonial idea is that they must interact.
Voilà. Et pour illustrer l'interpénétration, il y a les colonies. Et je crois qu'il faut regarder où ils sont situés les colonies. Les colonies israéliennes dans le territoire français, le territoire palestinien, ils ne sont pas choisis n'importe comment. On a choisi des endroits où il doit être visible. À tous les Palestiniens doivent voir que ceci est une colonie par les formes, c'est-à-dire le bâti, et par la végétation.
And so to make this interaction visible, the choice of the location of these settlements, because it is through the settlements that this interaction goes on, are carefully done. All Palestinians must see from several places where the settlement is.
Et l'Israélien qui habite dans la colonie doit garder une continuité avec Israël. Et cette continuité, elle est spatiale et elle est visuelle. Quand vous entrez dans une colonie, sur une colline, vous avez l'horizon vers Israël. Vous voyez Israël.
And the opposite is also true. The settlements, the colonizers must also have direct interaction with Israel. So the colonies, the settlements are always in the upper places so that they can see from there to Israel. They can look to Israel.
Et vous avez la continuité spatiale par les routes. Les routes, ils sont très bien pensées. Je crois que on ne se rend pas compte, mais il y a un travail sur le paysage des tracés des routes pour relier les colonies à Israël qui est très intéressant. Et il y a même des travaux là-dessus.
And this includes the road planning. roads are planned according to this idea of interaction of the two territories.
L'objectif, c'est vous êtes dans un territoire qui est instable. C'est ça le point.
Quoi?
Si vous êtes dans un territoire, le message pour le Palestinien, c'est qu'il doit sentir qu'il est dans un territoire instable.
The message for the Palestinians is that they are in a unstable, shaky landscape.
Voilà, grosso modo, j'ai analysé quelques éléments là par rapport à la lecture du paysage. J'avais fait un travail un peu comme ça avec les étudiants en Palestine. Mais alors, il y a 3 mots essentiels: éclatement, discontinuité et fragmentation. C'est ça le principe. Si tu peux traduire ça, c'est bon.
This came from a study made with Palestinian students in which they stressed these 3 concepts. Let's say, blow up, okay, sort of a metaphorical explosion, discontinuity, and fragmentation, okay, to split several areas which should be compact.
Et cette affiche résume tout. Bah, le paysage est à l'horizon, c'est Jérusalem. Voilà. Merci. Merci à Martial.
And now, the last intervention before we start asking questions and debating is from another colleague who also collaborated in the journal, Maria Fernanda Cassius, who is an international lawyer, and she's in France, but kindly accepted to participate in this debate.
Good afternoon, everyone. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here and talk about such an important topic as Palestine and the environment. For my paper, I focused on the exploitation of Palestinian natural resources in Area C of the West Bank and how it is being carried out by Israel. And this serves as an indicator that the occupation has crossed the line into de facto annexation of territory.
Let me just ask you something. Explain them what is Area A.
Yes, I will do that. Yeah. Yes, I was just going to explain the Oslo Accords that were concluded in 1995 between Israel and Palestinian Liberation Organization, divided the West Bank into areas A, B, and C. These agreements were supposed to be temporary, but they are still being applied. And under these agreements, Area C is under rule of Israel. So Israel has control of civil matters and also of security matters. And this has facilitated that Israel can exploit natural resources in Area C, as it still has control of matters such as land registration, planning, and building, for example. I focus on the Area C of the West Bank because Area C represents 60% of the West Bank and is the place where we find most of Palestinians or West Bank's natural resources. And so what kind of resources do we find in this area? We find water resources, agricultural land and products, and quarries, Dead Sea minerals, and also even oil. And how is Israel carrying out this exploitation? Some examples are regarding water. The water system in the West Bank is still under Israeli control, and Palestinians need permission to build or maintain any water infrastructure. Israel has diverted waters from the Jordan River and also the mountain aquifer into Israel, which are supposed to be shared water resources. And so Israel extracts more water than it's supposed to. Israel has declared riverbanks as close military zones, also destroying Palestinian water infrastructure, and also constructing settlements over water sources. Regarding land, roadblocks, checkpoints, the construction of the dividing wall, and a very complicated permit system so that Palestinians have a lot of trouble to move around their territory. Also designating land as close military areas or natural reserves, and destruction of or confiscation of agricultural products and equipment by Israeli settlers. Regarding quarries, most of the Palestinian quarries operate in Area C, but in reality, most of these quarries are operated by Israeli companies, and Palestinians are denied permits to operate them. The area around the Dead Sea, which is part of Area C, should be under Palestinian control. Israel has appropriated this area and extracts the minerals from the Dead Sea, which is very important for the industry around this, for cosmetics and health centers. And also Israel has appropriated oil deposits, designating land as military zone and constructing a wall that divides the territory, and through the permit system for Palestinians to access this land. So how this exploitation relate to the concepts of occupation and annexation? We have to distinguish what is occupation and what is annexation. According to the Hague regulations, Article 43, I won't say all the definitions, so I don't extend it so much, but from the definition of Article 43, occupation should be a temporary situation where the occupier acts as de facto administrator and also has the duty of conservation to preserve the status quo as much as possible. On the other hand, annexation is a permanent situation where the occupier claims sovereignty over this territory. And the annexation can be carried out de jure or de facto. De jure means when there is a formal declaration, and de facto when there are facts on the ground that indicate that there is actually annexation that is happening. So for annexation to happen, we need a physical element, the occupation, and also an intent, the intent to permanently annex this territory. And we must remember that annexation is forbidden by international law, according to the prohibition of the use of force, and which is in line with other principles of international law, such as self-determination and sovereign equality between states and non-intervention. So how is this exploitation serve as an indicator for annexation? In the first place, the exploitation that we see in the case of Israel and Palestine, and the exploitation is a violation of the principle of permanent sovereignty of natural resources, which allows a country to freely dispose of its natural resources within its jurisdiction. And we also see a violation of Article 55 of the Hague regulations, which relates specifically to natural resources. According to this article, the occupier should be limited by the rules of usufruct. And this means that it should enjoy the fruits of the property, but not fundamentally destroying it or altering its character. And there's also a limitation regarding the use, as the use of these fruits should also be for the people of the occupied territory, not just for the occupier. And so it should benefit the local population. We also see other regulations that can apply to this kind of situation. For example, the prohibition of transfer of population, which a lot of times goes together in this case because the population is transferred in order to exploit the resources. And also the prohibition of the Fourth Geneva Convention of destruction of property in occupied territory, except in case of in absolutely necessary situations for military operations. So when we see a case such as this one, where these regulations are not being followed, we can infer that annexation is being committed, but we also have to have the intent. In the case of Israel, we can infer intent from the policies that are being carried out and practices, and also by official declarations. And there are several annexation policies that are being discussed in Israel, and such as the 2020 Peace to Prosperity Plan, which plan to annex big parts of the Area C of the West Bank. And there have been several declarations from international organizations like General Assembly and International Court of Justice, which talk about de facto annexation in the case of Palestine. And you can find this in the judgment of the International Criminal Court when it talks about the construction of the dividing wall. So from all of this, we can conclude that Israel is not using the Palestinian resources as occupier, but actually as a sovereign power, as it hasn't followed the laws of occupation, and specifically Article 55 of the Hague Regulations we want to mention. And so we have the physical element, the occupation, plus the intent. And we also have seen that this is backed up by the Israeli High Court. And there is an interesting case regarding the quarries, which was an Israeli NGO challenged the fact that the quarries were being operated by Israeli companies and not for Palestinians, which were denied the permits, but this did not succeed. So the High Court has also backed up Israeli policies. And so from all of this, we can conclude that, yes, annexation is being conducted in several parts of Area C of the West Bank. And we must remember that this is forbidden by international law. And even if it has happened, the law of occupation still applies, as this is an illegal situation. So Israel is still responsible as occupier for the exploitation it's conducting. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions.
So we will now enter the debate time. So anyone who wants to ask a question can do it in any of the languages that we use, and we will address it to the correct people.
The same applies to the chat. If you have any question, please raise your hands. I will give you permission to talk.
Go ahead. Jorge, tira o teu palavra para perceber. Can you sit here and ask a question here? Because people online will not listen. Sit down there. We use this chair for people.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for the presentations. I think it's very interesting. And the first question was about the use of pesticide. I wanted to know the impact of the use of 600 tons of pesticide over the biodiversity of the region, because I think this amount of pesticide must have some impact on the biodiversity. And the second question is for the ambassador. It's not especially on the topic of the review, but just to have his point of view, because Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah was talking about a one-state solution, and I wanted to know what if as ambassador of Palestine, we have considered the solution instead of two separate states, have like a federal state for both communities. And the third question is, how is it possible that they can have laws for occupation? Because I think occupation means it's a bit complicated for me to understand that there can be international law to regulate occupation. And the fourth, not like a question that I want to say French. I'll say French and try to translate. J'ai vraiment apprécié votre intervention parce que surtout la partie des trois facteurs des fonctions, des formes et des espaces, parce que je viens moi-même d'un pays, de la Côte d'Ivoire, qui est un pays dans cette complexe, dont le système agricole a été changé carrément d'un système verrouillé à un système d'exportation. Et jusqu'à présent, il y a toujours ce problème, on importe la nourriture et on exporte du cacao qu'on consomme. The fourth thing was to express my support to something said, the professor said about the function, the forms and the spaces on the colonization, because I come from a country, Ivory Coast, who has been a French colony, where the agricultural system have been changed fundamentally with the colonization, passing from I can say I forgot the Spanish. La cultura de sobrevivencia, yes, to exploitation country, and now we are importing food when we are exporting cocoa, and we don't eat cocoa in our country. So this impact of the colonization are really, and so I agree a lot with what he said. What's great.
You have said, Patrick, we shall keep to less than 6 questions. 3 is okay. 3 is okay. But you made 4. We are going to distribute these 4 questions. So about the pesticides, I don't know if Ahmad or Mazin are available to. Mazin. Mazin, are you listening?
So we'll make it so that your questions are sent to him, and we'll try to get you a response.
Okay, go ahead.
C'est pas dans tous les cas l'agriculture qui soit dans les territoires palestiniens ou dans le territoire israélien, vous ne trouvez pas une rigidité. C'est vraiment quand vous allez sur le terrain pour regarder la production, vous dites ça ne peut pas tenir s'il n'y a pas de pesticides. Donc, les quantités. Mais il y a une polémique, effectivement, par exemple, on sait, tu traiteras après, que probablement les Israéliens utilisent des produits pour impacter la fertilité des Palestiniens.
Mustafa tells us that if you see both Palestinian or Israeli agriculture, you cannot imagine that it should be possible without pesticides. Okay, so the impact of pesticides is very large. There is some doubts about the kind of pesticides the Israelis are using, because they also may have a larger impact on the Palestinian lands. But this is a intensive and very chemical agriculture on both sides. About one state's question,
Well, I can answer it simply. If you give someone an apple and he will tell you it's not enough, how about next question to him, can you share it? This is the question with Israel. They give them a big state, which 78%, and they say give the poor Palestinians 22 of the total. They say no way. How about now you will tell them let's share? It's impossible. They would do it, but I think it's a perfect solution. But I don't think the issue there is ideas of solution. The issue how to force Israel to accept any solution. If they can get by nothing, I think they will do it. So you have to find some ways to force them to accept something, but not to say no to the Palestinians, no to a state, yes to land confiscation, yes to occupation. It is the way to, I think the whole world got tired of many solutions. They got tired of many ideas for solutions, but we are stuck with Israel not accepting anyone. It's a good idea because all of us, we live equal, Jews, Christians, Muslims, black, white. We live under one system, under one law with equal rights. I don't think Israel is not even considering or wants to know about it. But it's a good idea for us to live equally.
Yeah, well, I have to say for me, it's also a bit of a contradiction. Yeah, my interpretation is because, well, the laws of occupation that I mentioned, the Hague regulations, they were issued over 100 years ago. And so at that time, occupation was still more accepted than today. And the international system that we have now was formed after the Second World War. And after that, colonizers started giving up their colonies, but that did not happen in the case of Palestine. So we still have this special case that the law of occupation still applies, but it's also in contradiction to the current world system that we have now.
We have something one in the chat. We have two questions on one. First of all, I will read one that was written in the chat. Lana Furtado says, good afternoon, everyone. I want to ask Professor Mazin if it's possible to denounce and condemn Israeli state for polluting and damage ecosystem in the Palestinian territory. This is an environmental crime.
Yes, you want me to go ahead and answer? Yes, it is possible to challenge. There are many venues for us to challenge. Number one is there is the international law, and there is the conventions that the State of Israel and the Palestinian Authority has signed as the State of Palestine. This includes Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Convention on Climate Change, many other conventions that Israel signed. And so by signing, they have committed to following. But of course, they are not following. For example, I mentioned the designation of protected areas based on calculations of military use and settler use, not based on biodiversity. And so I think we can take Israel to court in international court systems. And if that doesn't work, we can always challenge Israel membership in those organizations and demand those organizations follow their own laws, like the COP Conference of Parties that signed the Convention on Biological Diversity. We can demand that they actually follow their own rules regarding membership and expel Israel from these international bodies. This is as far as external, but internal, inside, which is even more important, is to challenge them on the ground. When Israel denies us access to a particular piece of land or a particular protected area, or dumps their toxic waste on us. We have to challenge this locally, and there are many ways of doing this. Popular resistance, even using Israeli courts sometimes delays some actions by the Israelis, even though the court system in Israel is biased, but at least it's slow, and so you can use it to delay some actions and to give you space to plan some other things. So I always encourage more resistance, because that's a solution to many issues of colonialism and settler colonialism. Thank you.
So after your question, you have another person that asked before you to do questions in this online. Please, Fina Israel, you can go ahead, ask your question. Please be brief.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Fina Israel, and I'm part of the IMAS group, the third cohort. So my question, the first question I have is with regards to governance, because when we talk of environmental governance, right now we have to acknowledge that there is the rise of different actors, not just state actors when it comes to governance of the environment. And in the discussions today, which have been excellent, I have not heard of the role and place of non-state actors or even sub-national actors in Palestine, especially when it comes to their place in environmental governance in Palestine. So my question would be, to what extent are the non-state and sub-state actors in Palestine involved in environmental management, and what is the effectiveness of their action when it comes to that particular action? And the second question that I want to pose is, let me just give a classical example. When you come to Africa, in Somalia, for instance, the continued and protracted conflict has led to the rise of non-state actors, rather terror groups or insurgent groups like the Al-Shabaab. And these terror groups have, to some extent, the Al-Shabaab has to some extent shaped and given and posed a challenge to the government, especially when it comes to the management of natural resources. So would you comment that with this state that Palestine is in, caused by the conflict, would you comment that there's been the rise of maybe insurgent groups in Palestine that compete for the existing environmental natural resources with the government, and of course hampering overall environmental management? And the final question, of course, very short. We've in the presentation done by Mazin, we've noted that there are weak environmental governance arrangements for Palestine as a country. But one thing we have to acknowledge is that environmental issues are transnational issues. It affects not just one country, but two countries. Now, would you care to explain, do you think there are any modes of cooperation between Israel and Palestine beyond this conflict? Do you think there are modes of cooperation between these countries, or there's a gridlock and they can't work even on areas of joint environmental governance because of the conflict that the two have? Do you think there is an opportunity for these countries also working together? Because these are transnational problems that they have to jointly address. Kindly comment on this. Thank you.
I will start with the issue of just the context of this. Israel has been, since its founding, very brilliantly successful at separating Palestinian communities. And so creating Palestinians in Galilee, Palestinians in the Negev, Palestinians in the West Bank, Palestinians in refugee camps in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, fragmenting basically the Palestinian population. 14 million Palestinians are fragmented. The space for civil society has shrunk significantly, of course, as a result of this meticulous program of divide and conquer, if you want. So Palestinian civil society, while I'm proud of some of the actions they do, you have to realize that they live under extremely difficult situation with bare survival, let alone planning actions and carrying out actions. Now, having said that, of course, I always say there's more to do and more can be done even under all these challenges that we face. The external obstacles to us are many, but the internal obstacle of our own minds are also many. And I wrote a chapter in a book about post-colonialism. My chapter was about liberation from mental colonialism and how it's important for us to free our mind to be able to challenge more. That means self-education, etc. And once you free your mind, you can find ways that you can challenge, even within the limitations of occupation, colonization, oppression, uneven power dynamics, as we discussed in the paper with Dr. Isa in this issue of the journal Africana Studia. So non-state actors, if I want to start with that, non-state actors like non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, or even individuals can and should do a lot more in terms of environmental issues. We can start by reducing, for example, our use of disposable materials like plastics and or reduce our use of fossil fuels, plant some things. I even show children how they can plant on the roofs and on the ceilings, on the walls of the refugee camps, how they can plant some greenery by using recycled plastic bottles and things like that. So there's some space for work, and some groups are engaged in it, and to various degrees of success under the limitations that they have. But I think their role is actually much, much more important than state actors or trying to wait on the political situation to change. We should work in parallel. One, work on our own to increase our production, food sovereignty, and reduce our environmental impact, but also we should challenge the colonization occupation politically. That is a very difficult, narrow path, but we must do it. Now, in terms of cooperation with Israelis, I would say Palestinians have asked for support from anybody who's willing to join them in joint struggle. Now, there is a difference between joint struggle and between normalization activities, and we do not encourage normalization activities. And there's a lot of normalization activities in like peace building and all of this stuff that works to beautify Israel and Zionism, and works as a way to relieve the conscience of some Israelis by saying, look, we're sitting together with some Palestinians and we're eating hummus and drinking coffee. And I'm against those kinds of normalization activities. If you want to join us in the struggle so that we build a better future together as Palestinians and Israelis, to build a better future, has to be based on justice, number one, including rights of refugees to return to their homes and lands. But it has to actually be built around struggle, meaning not built around just sitting together and chatting and drinking coffee. So I stood in solidarity with Israeli refuseniks, for example, refused to serve in the Israeli army. We together stood in front of bulldozers uprooting 1,000-year-old olive trees and destroying landscape to build the walls. That we discussed the impact of the walls on biodiversity in one of the papers in the journal. And on, we can do some things together, but it has to be do some things together. And I'm afraid some of the environmental groups like EcoPeace that are joint Israeli Palestinians they are more visual phenomena rather than real phenomena of impact on the ground. I tried myself to reach to Israeli environmental groups to get them to be involved, but they work within a system which is all built around the Zionist project and not around environment. In fact, designation of protected areas, for example, is done by the Jewish National Fund, which is a Zionist organization that's intent on cleansing the land of its natives and planting Zionist colonizers from around the world on the Palestinian land. So it's not really about greening the land. This is what we call by greenwashing. Israel uses greenwashing, the idea that Israel is a green country and that it's planting trees. But it's actually, I can show you with documents and papers, and we will publish more papers about this issue soon, about greenwashing and how Israel did not actually add to the green cover in Palestine. They subtracted from the green cover in Palestine.
Isabel, just ask a question.
I have three questions, so maybe I do two that are related, then I skip for the others. So my two questions are for the ambassador and for the last lecture about the issue of the very non-exit problem of Palestine. Isn't true that de facto international law works with the relation of powers and forces? So for me, the question is, if the issue is not of sovereign power and true power, because while this doesn't happen, a true strength of power, it will never be respected as a sovereign power. Unfortunately, before, during the Palestinian struggle, when it was support for an armed struggle, this was seen in a horizon that this could be possible. Right now, there is no possibility. But in truth, wouldn't this be, because international law only works when there is power to be respected. And right now, the current affairs are even more showing how this is working like this. This chessboard of powers are working. And even for Israel, as the last lecture spoke, the accords of international law are better because they take land and people and take them out, and they are not accountable for those people that they're taken. The natives, they don't care because in the accords, they can do whatever they want. They will not respect the accords and they take those people out. So for them, it's even better because at least a colonial traditional power will have some accountability to those native people. In this case, not even that is necessary. Even the issue of South Africa, the idea of both parties of South Africa can be interesting, but in that time, South Africa was fighting in several front lines in the border wars, and they lost two traditional allies in the continent, Portugal and Rhodesia, and from then onwards, they kind of knew if the conflicts continued, they couldn't sustain. So power was necessary. Second question, and for the ambassador, when you relate to the support that came from the Western civilization to make Zionism happen and Israel to be created, those roots are very strange and interesting because I think they go back, really back. So when you mentioned the Christian Zionists, and I think they relate with British Israelis, so those people in England and also France that believe that the Jews are to retake the land and rebuild the temple, just like the Christian Zionists. And those people were always supporting every power play to that path. When you mentioned the Balfour Declaration, apparently it was Mr. Rothschild that spoke with Balfour about the issue to declare how we will help. So these are powerful people. And with the eschatological, almost fanatical beliefs, some of them, of course, are not as powerful, but with fanatical beliefs, all these people will be held accountable. And how can you confront a fanatical belief? They really want to rebuild the temple, regardless of whatever happens. Just like some of the radical people in Israel want. So how can we even speak with these people to a certain degree and help them accountable? That's it. Third question was for him.
So your first question about armed struggle and to force occupiers out, right?
Is that
The
and
question,
sovereign power, like the idea is that includes sovereign power has to be forced.
the question, the international community also and international law. International law is violated, it's clear, with no doubts that Israel is considered occupying power. What can force them out? Palestinian resistance. We face an issue. If we do resistance, it's called terrorism. In the Western world, we are terrorists. Even if you speak against Israel, they will think anti-Semitic. Here in this town, when the government of Portugal decided to limit the number of Jewish immigrants to this country, they accused people here of being anti-Semitics because they don't want to give them visas to come and take some lands here and live. They were in the court now, European court, calling Portuguese government anti-Semitic because they don't want to give them the Portuguese land. What is anti-Semitic in telling them you have to prove that you have really Jewish ancestors, not 50,000 got papers from Rabai here, and you heard about all corruption, but the time when they said the government, we want to be strict, they are called anti-Semitic. We are called terrorists. So any resistance is not acceptable. And our best friends in Europe, they are saying, please, you Palestinians, don't resist, because when you resist, you make your more damage. Try to use peaceful one. Peaceful is not working too. International law cannot be implemented. I was the one who presented Palestine case at the ICC when I was ambassador in The Hague. I worked in the case years. When a group from the ICC professionals, they want to go to Palestine, they were not allowed to. I went with them and they were stuck in Jordan. So I was so polite and I said, let me take you a tour near Palestine. I took them a tour to Jordan River from the east side just to see Palestine. They are not allowed to. So you can see what the issues when they killed the journalist. It's clear how even they came and said, well, it seems that a shot came from our soldiers, but maybe also Palestinians are liable. So I don't know what answer is this. So it is very hard when they control the media, they control all international organizations. You know, when in any organization we want to join, Canada, Israel, Australia, and this, they are the first one to campaign. No way. I mean, I think they should be happy that Palestine would like to join the civilized world, not to be a terrorist, as they say, but they say you are not allowed. So we are not allowed to be in international organizations. And also to the previous question, talking about organizations to help in environment. Who cares? The thing Israelis will allow them in. Anyone today, if you are here, active or say anything, and you go tomorrow to Israel, you are not allowed. You are sent back because they say, in the end, they say you are anti-Semitic. If you join the BDS, you know, 17 states in America, they made it a crime to say we don't want to buy settlement products. It's occupied, the stolen lands from the Palestinians. You are a criminal, and it was justified in the American laws, in courts. Finally, one young woman, Palestinian, went to court, and this, I think, fighting back, and maybe they want to reverse these issues, and so. International community and the world sometimes are not fair. They are with the power. Do you hear the Jewish lobby in America? They can't. It just the Jewish lobby, they believe they want to control their power. And you ask Portugal here, say, recognize the Palestinians. They say, we love you. I mean, we support you, but we are a small country. Why you are a small country? Why cannot be saying what you believe is right and just? People are scared. The next day, America will cause them problem. This is it's easier for you to ask, but very difficult for you to be a Palestinian trying how to survive, trying how to resist, trying no job to go to work in Israel itself to make living for your family, and it is damaging your cause. But what can you do? Sometimes you have a family you want to feed. You have to work as cheap labor. No one cares in the world. It's the best thing are telling the Palestinians, keep quiet. Maybe Europeans here, they pay some for hospital, for school to build, and that's it. And they say, well, you are good people, and we are very sorry that Israel is doing it, but they don't want to join in the struggle. Like my Palestinian colleague said, if you are really sincere about peace, join in the struggle. Don't say, well, I think you are a human being and I treat you as Palestinian being, and maybe you have coffee together. So I think it's the responsibility in Israel today for Israel really to fight extremists and fight the occupation. And we appreciate the young ones who really go to the checkpoints and be carrying guns. Most of the people who shoot are the young kids from Israel, 20 years old, 19 years old, young boys, putting on them on a checkpoint, the first thing they pull the trigger. This is, for me, I really feel bad, to fight. He's a kid. It reminds me with my son getting in a checkpoint to shoot. Then I thought of myself, how can I kill this? Or, think even on resistance, even he's a soldier. I think I wish I could sit with him to talk and convince him that we should be equal, fighting the same enemy, the injustice on both. It is very hard. We are humans. We don't want to be, just the Palestinian, go kill, just bomb. It is very hard sometimes to see, like I said, even a soldier. I know he doesn't want to be there. He's 18, 19, and he's in the front row. They sent him to the Palestinians, and it's really emotional on us to behave in a different way, except I wish I could talk to him. I don't want to harm him. He's 18 years old. He is pushed to be there in the front row. So it is very hard on the conscience of the Palestinians sometimes to be just believing in the resistance. It's emotional issue. It's not easy. We got tired of resistance. In the end, in politics, you have to reach a point when you sit to negotiate. They use warlock in all these issues and conflicts to get them to the point to negotiate, to talk. But it seems in Israel, it's not working. But as long as we are left alone, this occupation will continue. If you are not, I'm not saying personally, all of you, that all people with conscience and believe in justice, don't join the struggle, I think we will be left alone. The struggle is not for the Palestinians if it has to do an oppression and injustice. It's all of us. So I think to look at the Palestinians alone, that they should resist and we don't do anything, I think it is difficult.
I'll just thank
Hello, good afternoon. So I see a lot of parallels with Western Sahara, occupied territories of Western Sahara. And when we talk about greenwashing and humanitarian law and occupation law. So like in the case of Palestine, Palestine has been war. We have all these rulings from the ICC, we have the rulings from the United Nations, from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, from the High Commissioner from I don't know what, from the refugees, I don't know how many environmental organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, so forth and so on. People are not allowed into the territory, of course, like in Western Sahara, it's the same. And now we have all these decisions, but the question is, how is it possible to put any of them from paper to reality? Because we don't see that. So the issue, when you said right now that Israel, Palestine would like to join the civilized world, I don't know if they are uncivilized, because the United Nations are completely dominated by the occupiers. The 5 Security Council permanent members are the ones who have, except China and Russia, who are not in the list of the fourth committee of the United Nations. The other 3 all have occupied lands, so this will never be an issue that will be solved from the United Nations. So how can we do that? You say no resistance, then they accuse us of terrorism. But if you don't do anything, they will treat you the same as terrorists. So this is a deadlock. And what I really want to know is there any way that you can see to make one of these decisions be implemented? Is there any way that this decision can be implemented? And we go to the greenwashing again, because this is the environmental issue. Now with the new accords between Morocco and Israel and the fertilizers, phosphates that they actually route from occupied West Sahara and use in Israel and in Palestine. So this is also a greenwashing, and it was already denounced by several organizations. So this use of fertilizers were completely illegal. Where which court could be the court to address, and would this court have any mechanisms to put in place what they decide?
I mean, to me, the question, well, I have just one comment. It is not to do, look, when Israel recently went in the middle of the night, shut down 8 international Palestinian organizations would do with the human rights, all international community. They said the Israelis were wrong because they accused these organizations, Al-Haq and all this, which they send the international community information about violations of human rights. When the Israelis shut down all these organizations, what did the world do? What they will do? Nothing. So this is an issue. What can we do? These organizations, when a military comes in and shut all these organizations work with human rights. And the Israelis cannot prove to any country in the world that they support terrorism. Israel, sometimes they say, hey, some of the people work there, they support some Palestinian factions. I don't know how they say it. Even the United States did not believe them, and they told them, this is not acceptable. This is not a reason to close these organizations. So it is so difficult for us. It's not easy to do. We tried. I mean, could you imagine what worse for someone to to carry bombs and go explode himself? People gave up hope. People do this, or a girl to get a knife and to fight soldiers who are with machine guns. Could you imagine a small knife? They accuse her of it, and sometimes even if she is walking there toward them, they shoot. How many? 37 or so this year or more were killed like that. So it's sometimes Israel is going crazy. The question to us, to Israel and to the international community, what are you doing about this? There was occupation recently in Ukraine. The whole world went crazy. And they say, okay, we will not accept any elections and this. And for us, the whole world will accept settlers election in the occupied territories, and the whole world saying this is occupied territories. But Europe is saying any outcome for elections happen in Ukraine because it's occupied territories, we will not accept it. But they are accepting all Israeli elections in the occupied territories and settlements and everywhere. And that's you, because I'm not saying you personally, this is your countries, this is Portugal. But publicly they say all the time, because they want to make us feel better. This is wrong, Israel. But what wrongs mean to Netanyahu? Nothing, he does not care whatsoever. So sometimes, believe me, try to understand the victim, what they do when these mothers lose their children and so on. This is the most difficult times for us. I mean, so what can we do? You know, Israel is a country with all nuclear weapons. No one talks about that. Israel, the only country is making the whole issues in the world, violations of international law and so on. But, they are popular in everywhere, in every place. Israel, you are the Israeli ambassador. And some nice people, or so people who are not, they would be not interested in talking. This is minority, you know, that people opposing not him as a human, as ambassador, but representing and occupying power. And that's the reason also the BDS people say, I don't want to buy this product because it's from occupied territories. And now countries saying it's illegal. You cannot do that. So people, they should do your own business. Why don't Portugal, this is your question to the Portuguese, can't recognize the Palestinian state? Why not? Because you are believing in the two-state solution, you are recognizing the state of Israel, recognize the other one. Even the parliament here, they made a recommendation to the government to do that. But they say, we are a small country, we will get problem with Washington if we do that. So please understand us. They are scared like this. And you tell the Palestinians to do more, countries like this, and they understand what oppression, and they revolted, and they enjoy every year the anniversary of the revolution to end the oppression and the injustice. Even in the Constitution paragraph, I don't know what's the number, saying you shall support the oppressed people in their struggle and this. Recognize us, say, well, two-state solution applies to the Palestinians. So this is issue not easy. I mean, it's good. I wish the Palestinians would do this. I say the same thing. But I'm telling you, if you don't be part with us, I think things will never change.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, and also with everything the ambassador said. Sadly, international law is not always implemented, and I think we try to do what we can with the tools that we have. Like the case I mentioned about the International Court of Justice regarding the wall, that was in 2004. The court said that there was de facto annexation, there were illegal settlements, and yeah, sadly nothing has changed. But yeah, we still have to keep trying to do what we can. Hopefully there will be a good outcome at the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Yeah, so.
Yeah, my question was not about the rulings, which are good, but how will the ICC apply them? How will the implementation? Who is going to implement them?
Yeah, that's one of the main problems with international law, that there are no enforcement mechanism.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of politics involved.
Yeah, it's politics. It's controlled, by whom? And I think there is a quote for Sharon said, Jews can take anyone in the world to court, but no one in the world can try any Jews. This is a big quote for Sharon. You know, because they want the whole world to feel guilty about what happened, which today I say it was against the humanity, what happened by the Nazis and this, but what can you, and that's not an excuse to oppress others. So I know the ICJ, when they did the wall and the rest of the resolution, I talked to them and they say, look, we wrote everything in the resolution, your violations about the prisoner, this. It's not the issue by the laws, it's how to implement them. There is no power can implement that. Look to what happened in 1992 or 91 when Saddam Hussein occupied Kuwait. Within months, United States, international community, I think also Portugal supported, they went to a war and liberated Kuwait from Iraq. But that doesn't apply the issue of occupation and justice and this, it could happen in everywhere except Palestine. And in the beginning, what I talked today, why? Because Israel is part of the Western imperialism in the region. So that means they have to survive and to stay in power to protect Western imperialism interest in the region. It's clear as that. So no matter what you do, you see the reason, and this is what I said in the beginning, why this conflict is not ending. It was invented by European American imperialism. And how they will say no now? They say more support, more power, more weapons. Anytime they compete, the security with Israel. And you see what happened in England, the new prime minister, said she is considering moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Still didn't get hold of power officially, and the first thing she wants to please the Israelis. You know, some American presidents thinking to run elections, they go do the first declaration in Israel. This is, it's bigger than the Palestinian, it's imperialism. And this is how it is function. So it's an issue concerns all of us.
Good. Next question, something about the environment.
Students from Italy, and I've just arrived. I had the chance before to travel in Palestine and to spend some time there. And this year, some friends living in Hebron spread a call for the internationals able to go to the West Bank to help families with olive harvesting. And basically, the season of olives harvesting is approaching, and families are not able to work in olive trees and harvest olives. So I would like, there are friends of mine from Palestine who are saying that it's getting more and more complicated for internationals to enter in the West Bank. And I think both from a solidarity point of view, but I think also for tourism purpose, but I would like to understand if you know, how they can access in the West Bank to support families with olive harvesting, which is I think a very environmental topic and very contemporary. And I would like also to just add that what Professor a fait, c'est que vous disiez sur le paysage colonial, ça a été aussi avec les colonialismes italiens dans la Somalie et Éthiopie. I was saying that what Professor was saying about the dual landscape worked as well for Italian colonialism in the Horn of Africa.
And thank you very much for your time. And for
Thank you. About the comments about going to Palestine, we don't control our borders. A few years ago, I remember 8 kids, boys and girls from high school from Portugal. They went to Palestine to work similarly to one of the villages in Palestine, and they were sent back after 2 days being denied entry. And I tried to raise the issue here with my friends in the parliament and this, and believe me, no one dares to raise the issue with the Israeli embassy. And they were sent back, and they were paid by project from the European Union money. And I think these kids were sent to Salfit or Tubas in Palestine, and they were denied entry with false accusation. You don't have this, you don't have that, papers, this, and their families show that where are they going, but in the end, 2 days they were sent back. Nothing was done. So it's, talking in details, it becomes difficult and annoying and this. So occupation is terrible. You expect everything from it. So we shouldn't go to the details. I think this occupation has to end. That's it.
First of all, thank you so much for all the presentation. I have 3 questions, very small questions. A political one, a more legal one, and an environmental one. The first one is, I don't know how diplomacy in Palestine works, but my question is, how is the diplomatic community in Palestine advocating for the 2-state solution, or for any solution that can work on the ground right now? Not just in the international community, but also how can it work? Like, I'm sorry if I speak in Arabic, but it was always on the table. It was always there, like a long time, but no one advocated for it. And now with the international double standards, let's call it, with what's happening in Ukraine, I think there's a space for the diplomatic community to like advocate for a 2-state solution more strongly, let's say. So if this is on the table, if this is an option, how can the diplomatic community like advocate for it, and what is the role of other non-state actors like NGOs and others to support in this domain? The legal one is that I'm not a law student, but from what I understood from you is that the Hague regulations, or the Hague regulations, yeah, they are 100 years old. And from 1917. So I'm not sure if a renewal strategy should be put in place, because these things like needs to be revisited and renewed and refreshed every once in a while, because the occupation strategy should not work anymore because it's contradicting what the international community is saying, for instance. So if this is an option, how can it be implemented? How can it be propagated in some manner? And the third question is, I mean, we discussed how the occupation can affect the environment in Palestine, but also how the environment affects the tensions or the struggles of the people as well. Like, how can climate change exacerbate existing tensions between communities and between different factions? This is very prominent in Africa, for instance, how the environmental degradation, climate change, water issues, water shortages, like heat waves and others, affect already existing tensions and vulnerabilities that are pre-existing within the communities. If this is the case that is already existing in Palestine, and you can see the effects of climate change, for instance, in Palestine and Israel, with the heat waves, with the droughts and everything, this can exacerbate the tensions that are already there. If this is a prominent thing that happens, what are the possible solutions that are needed to tackle this? Like capacity building, for instance, should there be a system in place that could be implemented, to capacitate officials in order to tackle the climate issue in a more broad way. These are my 3 questions. They're very narrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll answer the first one very quickly about the two-state solutions. It's true, it's on the table now. Seems like the best option at the moment, but the question how long it could stay on the table. If we don't act now, there would be no two-state solution because the land proposed for the Palestinian state are taken, shrinking every day, and there is nothing would be left for Palestine. So if we don't want to act now, this option is done.
Yeah, yes, about the Hague regulations, I don't think they will, I mean, yeah, they're obviously very outdated, but I don't think they will be modified because at this point, there should be no occupations because there's a lot of other treaties more recent that you understand that there should be no occupation at this point. And yeah, in 1945, the UN Charter prohibited the use of force, and occupation is a form of that. So there should be no occupations. But yeah, it's also a reality. So you still apply them. It's a contradiction. But yeah, I don't think that anything will happen in that regard.
One question is the answer. I don't know.
Alors, pour l'impact que tu traduis, pour l'impact de la communication par rapport à l'environnemental, je donne un exemple. La forêt. Une fois que, par exemple, au Maghreb, ils ont fait la même chose dans le territoire palestinien par rapport à la forêt. On a classé la forêt. La forêt, c'était un bien communautaire, c'est-à-dire c'est la biodiversité qui le gère. Et une fois qu'on s'est installé, on a dominé, on change le statut juridique de la forêt.
An example of this double interaction between environment and politics, Mustafa gives the example of the woods. Okay? The woods are Commonwealth woods, and it was run by people. But once you are in a colonial situation, it's of course changes, and it's run by the colonial power.
Une fois la forêt, il appartient à l'État, donc aux colonisateurs. Les communautés n'ont plus le droit d'exploiter la forêt. Le résultat, c'est que la forêt devient un paysage ennemi, adversaire de la communauté. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec un paysage ennemi? On le détruit.
So once for instance, the woods, the vegetable landscape, it's controlled by the colonial power. Communities have no longer the right to touch it, to run it, to exploit it. So the forest becomes an enemy of the people. So what can people do to enemies? They will try to destroy it.
Et c'est ça qu'on appelle le droit national.
And this is what you call landscape degradation.
Et c'est la même logique qu'on a fait quand on a créé les grands parcs internationaux. En Afrique, on appelle maintenant le parc national de je ne sais pas au Sénégal, le parc national au Kenya. C'est la même logique. Et ça a créé des tensions qu'on n'arrive pas à solutionner jusqu'à maintenant.
And this is a repeated story in every national park that was created by colonial power or a state power and not with the support of the local community.
Jamais oublier que l'arme fatale, l'arme vraiment le suprême de l'arme de colonisateur, c'est le juridique. Le juridique, c'est la loi. Il va changer des lois. Israël ne fait rien d'autre que changer des lois.
Well, the colonial, one of the most lethal and secret weapons of the colonial state is law. Once you change the law, you can speed up the changes.
That's all.
Are you going to have more questions? So go ahead, please. We are not repeating. It's not to come to you.
I'm also from the European African Interdisciplinary Studies, as my colleagues there. So I have one question for Honorable Ambassador, and the other question maybe for Mustafa. And the first one is because like last week I've been to a gallery, like it has the arts of Banksy. It's like when he just paint all of the graffitis. So he went to Palestinian states like a few years back, and then now he bought a hotel there, and then he's advocating this kind of arts of like getting outside people to know about more of your country. So I'm just thinking I mean, how do you think of this grassroots kind of culture, pop culture, that's to help to maybe to get people to understand more of your state and then advocate more of the state, and then to reach more people's understanding about the situation. Because even like this afternoon, I learned a lot from you, that a lot of the things, especially from the history while, that I don't know why this problem has been created. I think also like a lot of people, they're afraid because they don't know about it. Yeah, so that is I mean, like because now like his not just his art, but other form of this pop culture is very popular in amongst the younger people. The second question about maybe to Mr. Mustafa is you mentioned something about the landscapes of like the in the French colonization, that there's the old city and the new city. I've been to several of those UNESCO places like Canas, ancient city in Morocco, and then maybe Tunis city in Tunisia, and like I saw like still people are. It's more like people are living and working in the new city, and the old city just mostly for tourism. I don't know, like in the future, that are you seeing that this coexistence to be protected, or there's I mean, like how do we conserve this, or yeah, so maybe some. Sorry, I don't speak French.
May I ask you, where is this hotel?
The hotel, I can check it. I think it's in Beethoven, but I can check the name.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
Well, I think culture,
Yes.
sports, all this build bridges and understanding by people. And I think it is important. For example, I bet you half of the Palestinian homes have flags of Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the other half would be fighting when a game between Real Madrid and Barcelona, or it's just like, this is how you bring people together, they bridge, and they become to identify themselves with each other. So sometimes a picture really could change a whole society, could make effect. And I think it is important that not just politicians, but people with art, and so they can involve. And also, I think religious people could be involved in a good way, not the other way. So we need all parts of society And I agree very much that art and culture is a good way to bridge people, create understanding, and probably to ease conflicts.
En fait, j'ai un autre travail là-dessus, mais j'en parle pas ici. On a créé deux types de paysages complètement différents. On a créé deux sociétés culturellement différentes. Une fois que le colonisateur est parti, il a laissé la vie coloniale. Qui va occuper ce pays? Ça, c'est la question.
You have two different landscapes with different origins. When the colonizer will be leaving, the colonial cities will be occupied.
Voilà. Alors, dans tous ces pays-là, grosso modo, on a assisté à, c'est les gens assez aisés dans les médinas qui sont partis vivre dans la ville coloniale.
What happened is usually the wealthy classes of the colonial society are going to move into the colonial city.
C'est moderne, voilà. Mais le fait que la Médina il a perdu cette population assez aisée, il a perdu du poids sur le plan social.
Once the old city loses its wealthy population, it also loses some of its social power.
Le résultat, c'est que on a créé la Médina, c'est des terres gauches en fait. On est dans une crise, on a créé un paysage de crise par rapport à un paysage qui va se développer. C'est le paysage colonial de la Médina.
Je sais pas bien compris. Tu dis que qu'est-ce qui a perdu du pouvoir? La
Médina a perdu du pouvoir.
Ok.
Donc, du coup, il n'a plus de poids sur le plan social et socio-économique. Et il va être complètement, on appelle nous dans le langage, invisibilisé. C'est-à-dire que la Médina va devenir invisible. Mais la vie coloniale va prendre plus de poids. C'est ce qui se passe.
Of course, it's the old city which are going to lose weight, social power, visibility, and it's the colonial city will stand up as it was before.
Mais l'impact invisible est l'ordre social et psychique. L'impact invisible est l'ordre psychique.
Psychological.
En fait, ça a généré ce qu'on appelle des gens, des dualités, même au niveau de comportement des gens. On ne se comporte pas de la même façon dans la Médina que dans les villes.
It's a sort of schizophrenic behavior.
Moi, je l'appelle, je n'ai pas dit le mot approprié, mais c'est une ambivalence.
Dual behavior. People behave in a way if they are in a sort of a Western environment, and they behave in another way when they are in a traditional environment. Okay?
Alors, moi, j'aurais dit dualité paysagère, dualité sociale.
Dual landscape, dual mentality.
Okay, just one comment. Just the number of United Nations resolutions on Palestine, which none was implemented, the number is 754 resolutions. Security Council resolutions on Palestine were 97. The third one, human rights resolutions, 96. So 96 resolutions on human rights, none implemented. 97 Security Council non-implemented. General Assembly of the United Nations 754, no one implemented. So that tells you how international law, international organization is respected. Thank you.
Okay, so I would suggest that, because we are already out of time, that we should end with a comment from our colleague who was not giving so much, Martin. And then if everybody agrees, we will shut down the session. Okay. So Martin, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say a final comment about the issue of power structures. I always speak in my talks and others that basically the outcome for an imbalance of power represented by colonial, anti-colonial struggle can end in one of three ways: either the Algerian model or the genocide model like happened in Australia and the US, or what happened in most of the rest of the world, which is a one democratic state for all its citizens. In my opinion, that latter solution is what's going to really be the only solution. Israel, through the imbalance of power that the ambassador has spoken about, is trying to create a fourth scenario, a scenario perpetual status quo, perpetual apartheid, perpetual profiting from the occupation and colonization, and they are profiting from it. We never, like such conference, we don't discuss the financial areas, but it is about money, and there's a lot of profit to be made from status quo. But they won't succeed, and the reason they won't succeed is because of the, as we discussed earlier, the local resistance and the people who are involved that will change the dynamics. I think our challenge as Palestinians is to change the dynamics, and unfortunately the Palestinian Authority has not done so, has not taken the opportunities to do so. We could change the dynamics very easily now with the geopolitics changing, China and Russia changing power dynamics in the world. So it's no longer a unipolar world. Our leaders like Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, unfortunately, have not had the courage to really challenge the status quo and change the power dynamics. And we have to force them to do so, because without that change in power dynamics, we will have status quo for a few more years than what it needs to be. I think if we change the power dynamics today, and the Palestinian factions, for example, unite and stop worrying about positions and start worrying about the Palestinian cause more, we could actually end this within 5 to 10 years, because Israel is not that strong despite its nuclear weapons and everything else. We are still 14 million people. And within the country itself, there are 6.2 million Palestinians, including Palestinians inside the Green Line. That's a massive power that needs to be mobilized, as are the refugees around the world. And they are ready to be mobilized on all issues, but they just need better leadership, a stronger leadership, a leadership willing to take courage and believe in its own people. Thank you very much for inviting us and for this wonderful conference.
Thank you, Mazin. I think we'll end the questions. And if there's anything else, anything contrary, we'll end the session. This last part reminded that there is nothing in Palestine that is not politics, environment, most of all, and especially environment and archaeology. There is something more political than environment in Palestine is archaeology. Okay, thank you to everybody, especially. You want to take a look of this? We have some copies here for.